Good morning, guys, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in your day. Welcome back to the Triathlon Mobility Project, I guess you could say. Today we're focused in on the hip flexors, or at the start of the video we're focusing on the hip flexors. Of course, you need to have full range of motion in your hip flexors because it's going to affect your running and your running technique. You want to open out the hip behind you to get that efficiency on your stride. Also, on longer rides, your hip flexors are going to be tight. They're going to tighten up, and you want to counteract this with a workout such as this one. So I've started off with a lacrosse ball, and I'm trying to get into the hip flexor. Just on the side, actually, of the hip flexor, a little muscle called the tensor fasciae latae. You're trying to mobilize in this position that I am now. I'm stacked on the side of my hip. And the ball is just below my hip bone. So you don't want to actually go on the bone, but on a meaty bit below the hip. And your movement is kind of simulating that twisting over on the ball. So imagine you're going to then go face down on the floor. You see I've got my top leg just bent at a 90-degree angle as well to facilitate that. And again, if this is particularly tender to begin with, then just take it easy. Try to breathe into the position first of all before you start to move around. All three sports, to be honest, in question are going to be affected by this little workout, because basically see how I'm just rotating here slightly, and I'm rotating over the ball. In the swim, you're trying to strike a balance between full body tension. You don't want any sort of loose or weak areas of the chain because you're going to be flailing about in the water. But you also want a nice rotation from side to side, and that sort of rocking motion which facilitates a nice streamlined stroke. So you want the hip flexors and the muscles around the hip to keep you nice and stable and keep your body nice and taut and tight as you rock from side to side. So all three workouts are going to be affected by this. Switch over onto your other side once you're done. By all means, pause the video there, spend a little bit more time on that hip. But again, I'm breathing into that position and a little move around. I'm tensing up on the inhale, relaxing, letting the lacrosse ball sink in on the exhale. As you can see from that in a trance facial expression that I've got there. Reposition as needed. You know when enough is enough, or when an area needs particularly more work, and focus on that rolling over sort of technique, just like we do when we target the lats as well. On the foam roller, you're aiming to rotate around, clean up that tissue. I'm going to be focusing on some internal rotation in this workout as well. Internal rotation key to your run, because that is exactly what your hip does when your leg goes behind the body. Good. It's roughly 2.5-3 minutes on each side. That's all I'm focusing on today. This one was a little bit tighter for me, so just spending a little bit more time here. So moving on to our next position, just going to place that lacrosse ball to one side. And I'm going to go into a hip flexor stretch position, so half kneeling. By all means, put something underneath your knee if you need to. I'm going to bring my left hand overhead so as to lengthen out that lat, further open up that hip flexor, get into the obliques as well. I want to hold each stretch for roughly 2 minutes for it to be really meaningful. So obviously that's not 2 minutes, but I'm going to intensify the stretch a little bit, spend some more time with my foot in an elevated position. So you don't have to do this if it's a little bit too intense, you can just stay in that original position. But if you've got a little platform like that, just to prop the leg up on, focus on tucking your bum under, putting those hips into anterior tilt. By all means, have a little twist in towards that back leg. If you can, those quads might be screaming at this point, so you never want to be in pain. You always want to be that slight discomfort. Moving on to your other side, left leg out. Form those 90-degree angles to begin with before dropping those hips down with each breath. Right hand comes over this time, leaning in towards that front knee. Just take a look at the ankle as well, make sure that's not caving in or the foot is not collapsing on its arch. Neutral spine, stomach drawn in, shoulders back. So the option to intensify as well on this side. If you're happy to stay in that position, then feel free to do so. So you can change the emphasis of this stretch a little bit. The more knee flexion you have, the more you're going to stretch further down that quad into the VMO. But you see here, as I've got quite an open knee, I'm able to push forward with my hips a little bit more and open up the hip flexor. Then I can just bring that foot towards me a little bit and twist in towards the right hand side. Nice deep breaths. Breathe into it, don't make that pain face. So here's where we start to focus on our internal rotation. So come out of that position and form a 90-90 position. So that's hips at 90 degrees, knees at 90 degrees. Nice tall spine. So we want both the knees and the ankles sort of pinned down into the floor. And first of all, just get a little stretch on the glutes. So keep a nice straight back, keep your lower spine drawn in. And we're going to practice just twisting round, bending forward over that front knee. Trying to get comfortable in this position because it might be quite an alien position for a lot of you. just using the hand there, using the floor to just get a little bit more leverage, twisting round into it. This is going to feel quite sore on that left hip. Depends which way you're going into it, but basically it's going deep into your hip capsule, this stretch. It's pushing that joint right against the hip capsule, or that femur right up against the hip capsule, and that's why it feels like you want to throw up, basically. I'm going to use the kettlebell here to just solidify this internal rotation. So this allows me to create a bit of a counterweight, just to go a little bit further into it. Focusing on the breath. Just trying to get a little bit of lateral flexion as well there. So I'm trying to open up the spine, crunch into my left hand side. This one, when you're coiling up the core like this, is going to take your breath away a little bit. So focus on nice deep exhalation. Don't have a kettlebell to hand, then holding something like a banister or something like that is good, but just be wary that you'll be almost trying to skirt around the internal rotation by pulling against something, so you might not find it as intense on the hip, and you're going to be sort of using the hands to pull. So in all these situations, we want to not make it easy for ourselves, but actually isolate the area in question, this one being the internal hip rotation. So I brought that kettlebell down, and I'm going to go into some reps of these leg lifts now. So I'm lifting up using my hand to push myself into my end range, and then just fighting to keep it up there as my hand gets taken away. Moving on to the other side, you don't have to do it as controlled as I did there, but it's just nice to go through those little transitions, because you see how strong those hips are becoming and how they can just move on their own without compensation from the rest of the body. Yet again, just leaning forward over that front knee, nice straight back, feeling that into the glute. Have a little twist around in towards your back leg. Trying to use your own strength through that hip to just pull yourself into position. And you'll notice that you feel it around about the area that we were smashing with the lacrosse ball. That's why, it's very interrelated. You're going to enable you to use that full twist if you've cleared up that muscle with the lacrosse ball with a bit of myofascial release. So continue with this, trying to lever yourself around. Spend about 30 seconds or so trying to move around in this position before adding that kettlebell, taking that up onto the shoulder. Medicine ball or any additional weight just resting on the shoulder is fine, and actually it's probably better if it's just resting on the shoulder, because with the kettlebell here in this front rack position, it actually takes a little bit of strength to hold it up, and we're not really too interested in that. Just over 1 minute in this internally rotated position. Watch that your front knee is not coming off the floor. It's very much how you set up in this 90-90, which dictates how well you're achieving this position. So you want to be in a nice neutral spine position before you even start, which means no rounded back, not overextending. Once you feel like you've just gone to that end range, find your breath there, twist a little bit more. Use that strength, lever yourself around. This one's a tough one, as you can tell from those facial expressions there. So by all means, if you can't go that long at that end range, then don't worry about that. Just keeping this 90-90, you can spend as much time as you can in this 90-90 throughout the day. It's going to result in much better function in hips. Again, with those leg lifts, I'm just going to pick my back leg up, go as far into internal rotation as I can, then just dropping my hand away slowly, but trying to keep my leg up. Tried unsuccessfully there, but just fight it for as long as you can, and then bring it back down to rest. Just doing a few on my own, using my own strength there, before coming back out with the legs into straddle. Finishing off with a little bit of dynamic work for that internal rotation. I think we did this a couple of days ago. We're going to go into internal rotation and then external rotation simultaneously. So I'm trying to keep my body still, trying to keep my torso facing forward. Watch that you don't lean back too much in this one, because it comes a lot easier the more you lean back. Nice tall spine, flexing over to each side, just rolling on the ankles. Harder than it looks. If you've got any sort of hip impingement, it will be quite intense. Well done, guys. That is it for today, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.